Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Thriving Together. I'm your host, Nitika Chopra, and I'm so honored to be here with you today. I get to talk to a dear friend of mine, Quddus Philippe, about his incredible career and also how he ended up doing sound healing work, which is something that we get into a lot in this episode. And I loved my conversation with Quddus because, first of all, we just jumped right in. We were having so much fun. And I had to cut us off eventually at the very end because we could have just talked for hours and hours. And I genuinely have so much love for Quddus in my real life. We're friends, we're family, and we talk a lot about that in this episode. But it's also been such a beautiful thing to watch someone like Quddus, who has had such an impressive and incredible career throughout his entire career. And now he has found himself doing another wonderful, wonderful thing that's actually helping other people. And we get into that in today's episode. I want to read a little bit of Quddus's bio because it's important. He's done so much. And what you can know about Quddus is that he is a creative director, a sound facilitator, and psychedelic guide devoted to those brave souls embracing their edge and fulfilling their destiny. Originally from humble beginnings, he started his career as a campus radio DJ, then made a quantum leap, replacing Carson Daly as the host of MTV's iconic show, Total Request Live. Ever since being exposed to the power of sound, Quddus found his deepest calling. After being into music his entire life, including as a host at MTV, he experienced his first sound meditation in 2017 and had his most profound transformation. He proceeded to study directly under three of the best sound practitioners in the world. And now Quddus gets invited by people all over the world to deliver a uniquely empowering journey he calls Sound Sanctuary. Quddus is currently based in Amsterdam, and his latest focus is hosting a podcast that serves as a guide to the world of psychedelics called Inside with Quddus. Quddus is based in Amsterdam, and Quddus is based in Amsterdam, and his latest focus is hosting a podcast that serves as a guide to the world of psychedelics called Inside with Quddus. I really hope that you enjoy this episode. I had so much fun recording this podcast with Quddus, and it was so, so special. And I think we shared a lot about different tools, tips, and things that Quddus has also learned on his journey. So without further ado, here is my episode with Quddus Philippe. Both of us are just cheesing.
Well, the thing about this platform is you're literally looking at yourself. I'm looking at you, yes, but I'm also right next to you in this split screen thing. So I can't help but notice my unruly mustache right now. And so anyway, vanity aside, it's great to see you.
So great to see you. And I have we haven't even really started the interview yet, and my cheeks are already hurting because I'm just so happy to be with you. And I love you so much, Q. And I'm so excited that we're doing this because it has been a long time coming. And I feel like it had to be the right moment. And this feels like the right moment for you and also for me. So sorry we forgot to say hello, but hello everyone who's listening.
Yay. Yeah. Welcome to our friendship. Our ongoing, what is it, decade long now? It's been a minute. I mean, you're like family. I'm so happy to be here talking in a recorded fashion. It's so different. We just normally just grab a coffee when I'm in BK, but this is nice.
It's so funny that you're like so focused on your excessive mustache because I do not see any of that. And you know what it is? It's actually really interesting because I feel like I'm going to make this a deep moment, Q, of course.
Great.
Because with you focusing on your mustache, you call it excessive. I don't know anything about mustaches, so I just look at you and I'm like, oh my God, the most handsome face, like not at all thinking about your mustache.
Thank you.
And I feel like everyone has that though, right? Because I'm on here, I'm still swollen from my steroids. I'm like, I don't know, sometimes I don't feel like being on camera. That's why the first 2 seasons of the show are not on camera. And having to be in front of others, present yourself, whether it's in a platform and something bigger like this, or the biggest stages of all time, like when you were hosting TRL in front of the entire world at the beginning of your career, and things like that. how do you navigate that on a daily basis? Like, okay, today we're kind of making fun of it, making light of it, but is
Yeah.
there like a practice that you have around that?
Well, the reality of aging is what I've come to terms with finally. After 43 years on the planet, I'm realizing that I can't turn back the hands of time. As much as I would like to look like I did when I was 21 and I had a six pack and I had all the hair in the world, it's just not happening like that. And so I just have come to terms with it. That's it. There's no magic secret here at all. I'm just finally surrendered. I've surrendered to the human condition. That's what is the recipe for me.
Yeah, I can really relate to that because I know that there was a point, actually, right around the time I was turning 40, that I felt like I was constantly looking at those younger pictures of myself too. And I'd always be like, oh my God, she was so cute when she was like 24 or whatever, you know? And then there was a moment where I finally was like, but she's not 24 anymore.
Yeah, totally,
Right?
totally. Well, and as a society, we have glorified youth. It used to be, before media has completely flipped us on our head, that we would revere older people. As they got older, they would be even more interesting and more respected and more elevated in our society. But for some reason, now it's the opposite. We have
Mhm.
glorified youth to the point where we have actually shoved our elderly into homes where they aren't even in our field of view versus what we used to do. So for me, it's like I just zoom out and I look at it as a sickness that we have on a societal level, that I even have these thoughts about my
Mhm.
gray hairs, about my
Mhm.
bald head, that you're having thoughts about how you were versus, like it's just so insane to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the difference is there are people who are having those thoughts, and the thoughts I would almost say are like happening to them. They're happening so fast and they've
No.
just become such a huge part of their personality that they can't even realize that they're having the thoughts
Yeah.
versus like when you get to a place where you can actually become the observer, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that is such a blessing. And yeah, what were you going to say about that?
Well, so just to bring it into a really personal context, I had a conversation the other day with this beloved of mine who is also someone who's grappling with this in her own way. Now, she's such a conscious being that for her, she looks at the grays that have started to spring up as something that are not necessarily a bad thing. And she just is exercising a preference occasionally by dyeing it, but then sometimes she doesn't. And she takes photos with the grays, and it's a fluid thing for her, seemingly not as much of a thorn as it is for me, who's now, still looking at the things going on my face, even as I'm talking to you. So we're all on the spectrum, though. That's the thing. We're all on the spectrum. And so what was interesting was I actually got to the point in the conversation where I was like, you know what? I am not going to spend any more energy actually on this for my sake. If anything, you're the one that has to look at me more than I'm looking at myself. So what's your preference? This is literally the conversation we were having. I just threw it to her. I was like, you're literally seeing me all day. What would you prefer? Would you prefer I shave my beard and I sort of tuck the grays away? Would you? We had that conversation. And it was so illuminating to hear her say that she actually likes the beard gray and the bald head. And I asked her, okay, so well, what does that represent? What is that? What comes up for you when you think about my current state of visuals? And she says, well, to me, the grays represent wisdom. And the bald head represents that you are a masculine man that has lived a life and you're grown up. Right. This is what she said to me. Such a stark contrast to the internal critic that wants to tell me that I should have the head of hair I had when I was on TRL. It's just ridiculous.
I agree with her, but I also just am giggling to myself because as your friend, I'm like, only Q is gonna sit there and be like, "So tell me, what comes up for you when you look at my bald head and my gray hair?" I'm like, "You're beautiful." Of course she's, like,
Well,
enamored with you. So, I just have to say that. That's why I'm giggling because it's, as a friend, I'm like,
sure.
"Oh,
Well, I
cute."
appreciate that. I appreciate that. But
Mm,
it goes to show though that I think
feeling for you.
we're all
Yeah.
grappling with this subjective experience of ourselves.
Yep. Yep.
And when we actually make a point of getting curious about the objective experience of others, it is always so illuminating, isn't it? It's not just the looks, it's like how our career choices occur. Like I had a conversation about that with a friend too, and people were like talking about how inspiring with my choices when there was a moment where I was wondering whether they were just like way too unconventional and providing no financial security for me. So there's always all these ways to look at things,
Yeah.
and I just think it's important to try as best as we can to be objective and have friends that are around us that we can actually have these conversations with when we are wondering about how things may occur. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's healthier than just kind of storing it away in the cycle of doubt about what might be occurring for others.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing in the career aspect of things because I really want to talk to you about your impressive, incredible career. I am such a fan. Even though you're like my family, I feel like that's even more special when we can be fans of the
Oh,
people that we get to love on a real level. And I know I've told you this story many times, but I will I will tell the world now that I met Q back in, I guess, like, yeah, 10 year, maybe at least 8 years ago, if not 10,
yeah, something like that.
and something like that.
Yeah.
And we met through a group that we were in, and I was the welcome committee, and I FaceTimed Caduce and was talking to you and, introducing myself and all these things. And little did he know at the time that I had been one of the millions, I think probably hundreds of millions of people that had been watching Caduce what felt like my whole childhood, but for as long as TRL was on air. And I was such a fan. I actually don't find that I'm like a fan of people in that way that often. I find that, I can admire people's work and think that it's great and I can have appreciation for it, but I was like a fan. I was definitely a fan of yours.
Aw.
And yeah, I mean, I've told you that so many times.
Yeah, but it's
And
just sweet to hear. It's sweet to
yeah,
hear.
it's true. And I remember getting to meet you, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a real person who's like got this big heart. And
Mhm.
maybe that's what I was connected to all along and didn't even realize it, right? Because
Mhm.
you had this presence on TRL. And for those of you who somehow do not know, maybe there's a Gen Z person listening that has not seen TRL, but Total Request Live was the spot on MTV, and MTV was the network. Everything cool was happening on MTV. I watched Total Request Live every single second that I possibly could, and I watched it like it was like my homies that were hanging out.
Yeah.
It felt so incredible to be a part of that time in television and pop culture,
Mhm.
and you were such a figurehead in that. And I just felt so moved when I met you, and I continue to be so moved every time we get to spend time together
Yeah.
because there is this beautiful thing as your friend that I can see how you have followed your dreams, your passions, your heart, your truth, your brilliance, like what you feel and know that you are genuinely the best at,
Mhm.
and you have done it in what you mentioned before with your friend, a very unconventional way. And I know it makes it a little uncomfortable, but
No,
it's
no, it's a
so
nice way to put
good.
it.
Yeah,
Unconventional
it is.
sounds quite nice. Some
Listen,
would say maybe crazy.
no, listen.
Unconventional almost sounds like a sophisticated way to go about one's
Well,
life.
I am an Indian woman, which means I've been trained in the art of diplomacy. So I, I definitely know how to give a good spin to it. But I also think that that is true, like looking at things. So I was watching your TEDx talk, and if you haven't seen Quddus's TEDx talk, we'll be sure to link it in the comments, in the show notes, sorry. And one of the things that you talk about in your talk is obsessing about scale versus soul, and how that has us wonder what happens to our soul sometimes time and time again. And there was actually a point in your life, maybe many points in your life, where you have wondered what happened with your soul and your soul's purpose as you are on a path towards growth and scale from an external perspective. So, what I really want to talk to you about today is that I want people who are listening to understand a little bit about your journey towards really honoring the soul over scale, even when it's not easy.
Wow. I got chills as you were talking just now. I mean, it's something that I still grapple with, you know. It's again, it's this conditioning that I think we are all currently in. Like, I happened to start my professional career at a network like MTV where ratings were a regular conversation, but now we all have social media. And on some level, we're all kind of in the conversation of scale versus soul, because every day we each are essentially our own network, and we could pick up a phone and we could obsess about what kind of content will get us more ratings slash likes, comments, whatever. And so it is something that I still think about a lot and talk with people a lot about, because I had been at that intersection for years professionally. And it definitely at times turned me inside out, because on some level, if you're someone who really does care about authenticity and integrity and telling the real story, the prospect of having your ratings weigh on your ability to be that is a very challenging thing. And I don't care what anybody says about being free. If you are currently contracted as a media personality, that has got to be in your field of awareness. If it's not, you're actually a delusional human being. So for me, it was definitely a thing. And I don't want to speak for every media personality. It's perhaps something that someone is completely exonerated by. They are also levitating, by the way, and the current incarnation of Jesus Christ. So congratulations if that's you listening. I certainly was not levitating in that intersection. I was losing sleep. I was, well, in my 20s on MTV, I was drinking every other night at a party and not consciously aware that I was essentially a social alcoholic. There were things that I was doing to cope with that. I want to call it a predicament. It's almost dramatic, but it's a first world problem that we are all dealing with. That's the thing. Like, if you are wanting to be relevant, if you are wanting to have a personal brand, if you are wanting to show up for your friends and family in a way that's inspiring, on some level, we've got to look at the intersection that happens when you look at what you're going to say in the caption, how you're going to fill in the blank, whatever. It is a thing. Some people spend way too much time. I coached people for years on this, about how to deal with content creation in a conscious way that is healthy and sustainable. And it is a thing. It is not just you, right? If you're listening, it's not just you. You know, we all grapple with this stuff. You know, and fundamentally, what it comes from is one of the deepest human needs, which is belonging, right? If you think about it, because if you think on some level it's a risk to share this thing in this way on social media, because you might lose this friend, or might not be liked as much if your post doesn't perform, on some level, a reptilian brain equates that with not being in the tribe anymore. And so I am just so grateful that I found myself in a career path where I can really deeply understand that and have a robust conversation around that, to the point where it's not a blind spot for me. I'm aware of when I am dropping down into a rabbit hole of self-conscious mental masturbation around what I'm going to share with the world. Like that is something to be broken through time and time again. I'm never completely exonerated from that either. So I think scale versus soul is definitely a conversation we all get to have on some level because it's available to us all. And it's a dangling carrot. I mean, unless, again, if you're in an ashram somewhere listening to this, congratulations, I guess. But then you're not really in society. Society is currently inextricably linked to social media. Love it or hate it.
Yeah. I so appreciate those truths that you just shared with us, because although you might say, it's a first world problem, and I do appreciate that, sense of acknowledging that this isn't solving world hunger or a war or, things that are happening that are causing real trauma. But there is a lot of data and research that shows that this is actually impacting our brain and our mental health on a very biological, physical level.
Yeah.
And that these apps were actually created to enhance those challenges and insecurities and what you're saying about belonging. So
Yeah.
I really, really, really appreciate that, actually. And it's something that I've been working through on my own as well. And one of the things that I find with a lot of the stuff that you've been creating lately, and we're going to get into the beautiful, beautiful business that you've recently created that has been, I think, being formed inside of you for a lifetime, perhaps.
Yeah.
Sorry, a really good friend of mine said to me was that I needed to start creating for the sake of creating and not for this sort of rat race conversation that we're having.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And she's an amazing comedian, Liz Mealy. And she, in the comedy world, right, people, especially women, are not revered at all. And so she felt she had to take it into her own hands and really do comedy and create content for her. And it's something I've been aiming to practice. And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts about that. Like, do you find that you incorporate that in the way that you do create now? What is your process like when you're creating for others? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I definitely have gotten to a better place the past couple of years as I've really picked up the mantle of sound, and that being the focus, that being the thing that I always come back to. So for me, it has definitely become something that is a centerpiece for me. It's very centering, actually, in the midst of all the different choices I could make for sharing, to have that be the focal point that I can come back to. It's kind of like a meditation practice, right? Our monkey mind is going to do what it's going to do. Thoughts are going to come and go. But if you have your mantra or you have your breath to come back to, it's a very centering thing, right? And so
mantra. Sorry, I'm just stopping. You just said it like a real Indian. Okay, mantra. I'm sorry. Okay.
I've been
mantras going on here. No mantras. Okay. All right, mantra.
I'm hanging out with somebody who knows how to say it. I'm going to say it right.
Yes, you did. I'm sorry. I'm like, my face, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see my face just like lit up. It's like, all right, I should have not been surprised because it's you. But okay, keep going.
I've actually traveled through India. It's not just like a faux Indian appreciation here. It's like very well earned, I think. And just having been a meditator for years, I mean, for me, that is such a metaphor for what I'm experiencing now with my social media. Whereas before, when I was still wondering what I was going to do, as I felt that dissatisfaction I talked about in the TED Talk with media, and I didn't quite know then what I was going to do otherwise. But landing on sound, oh my gosh, the fact that I am just so devoted to this practice, and I just see the impact that it's having on people, and I love sharing about it. For me, it's not even like a social media strategy about getting more butts in seats. For me, it's I really deeply honor what's going on here, to the point where I can't help myself, actually. Like, if I can just imagine a visual of me, I am definitely the guy on the mountaintop screaming to everyone about this thing, And so it makes it such a genuine and joyful thing for me to be on social media, sharing about Sound Sanctuary experiences in the way that I do. It's never feeling like I have to. It's feeling like I get to do this. I have been so moved by this experience of sound. Is translating in a way where it never feels like I have to post on social media. It's like I am a blessed and honored man to be able to share about this practice on social media. For me, it's like penetrated this idea that things can be sacred, even on technology. Something that you'd think is like inherently not sacred, but all of it, when you think about it from like a high level, right, bouncing all the way up to like the spiritual perspective, all of it's God, including the apps. So it's really, it comes down to, well, how are we actually seeing it that way and using it that way? So I've been in an experiment about just how sacred I can make my social media, just how meaningful can I make it, just how fulfilling can it feel to me, first and foremost. And then creatively, of course, I think like a creative director, because that's what I did by trade for years. So it's like, how is this performing? Sure, that comes across my mind. And I do look at how I can optimize captions and things and the technical things. But to me, that never overrides the meaning at the core of what I'm sharing.
I love that so much. And when you said the part about everything is God, even the apps, that resonates with me so deeply. I've been reading Eckhart Tolle's books. I want to say again, but I could never really get through them the first time, so I can't really say I've been reading them again, but I have been reading them. And one of the things he talks about, especially in A New Earth, is how everything is about strengthening our ego. And a lot of times I have assumed, and a lot of people assume, that the ego is only that one thing, which is that super hyper inflated, almost masculine version of the ego, where this person feels really great about themselves and they're telling everybody.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing I've learned from listening to his teachings is that it's also the part of us that believes we are nothing.
Oof. So
That is
true.
also the ego. And I never knew that. And I think coming from this spiritual conversation, coming from wanting to serve others and wanting to lead with a level of humility and God in the center, right? I think a lot of times I've sort of collapsed the two, that I have to feel less than in order to be godly. And I think it's been a really beautiful thing for me as your friend to watch, like even in, the little Instagram stories that you'll share, or you did a video or something. And I said this to you last time I saw you in New York, like I can feel the difference. And it's interesting too, because it's not like anything you were ever doing before was wrong. You know what I mean? Like that was honest in that moment too. But it's really such a beautiful thing. So if someone is sitting here, listening to us talking, and they are maybe feeling defeated with maybe the online world, but even beyond social media, not everyone is a creator or putting their work out there on social media, but even just feeling like they're not aligned with that true higher purpose calling, experience, like you're talking about you're feeling with sound. What are some of the things that you did to allow yourself to discover that this was really a calling for you?
Yeah, it's not a straight line, that's for sure. I wish I could just shoot off a really sweet 3-step process. I mean, in a sense, I could break it down in the way that I did on the TED stage by talking about how taking inventory first and foremost is really important, to really take note of the things that we are passionate about. And no matter how deep into the self-development world I got, I always found myself facilitating workshops and finding that when I got to play music for the group, I would get lit up in a very distinct way. And the room would also light up in a very distinct way. So for me, it was very clear that my dharma has something to do with music. If I really look at that as the thread that has gone through every phase of my life. So starting out as a DJ, going into being a VJ on MTV, then going to MySpace as an artist development executive, then going into eventually other projects. always music, always I've literally had every role one can have in the music business, except for, of course, being a rapper, which I refuse to do. It just, Spotify doesn't pay shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking at the business model. It don't make sense. So I don't like try to sling merch my the rest of my life. But the fact is, I loved the frequency and the vibration and the sound at the core of all of that industry. It wasn't the industry, it wasn't all the sexy parties. For me, it was always the vibration, the frequency, the sound, the impact that that had on me. I remember in my teenage years when I was confused and felt like I didn't really belong, and I listened to hip hop in the 90s. I want to make it very clear. Hip hop in the 90s was a different thing than hip hop now. Okay, I'm not that old guy saying I wish it was like that. I'm just saying it was different. Okay. And so when I heard Tribe Called Quest, I heard The Roots, and I heard Common, I heard Nas, these MCs had a way of being in their frequency and their vibration and their truth that had me feel seen and understood and reflected in the music. And it was the most healing thing I have ever experienced. Of course, now I have a different reference point for a similar thing, which is sound from instruments like the Himalayan singing bowls I get to play, and the gong, and these shamanic drums I have, and these shakers from Peru. Like that to me is a different level of the same ball game. So it's a deeper relationship with frequency and vibration and sound, but the through line is fundamentally the same. So I would say for anyone that's grappling with that question of what's my purpose, what's my dharma, what am I here to do, where am I going to be of best service, I think it is asking the question, what lights me up the most? And I think we can overcomplicate it by thinking about the marketplace and thinking about blah, blah, all these things that our monkey mind likes to do. But I think fundamentally the question is, what lights you up? What lights you up more than anything else? Yeah, so really the fact that I've landed on sound as my dharma, my deepest purpose, it stemmed from the question that I'd been asking myself, which is what really lights me up more than anything else? And so if I only had 24 hours to live, what would I spend that time doing? I would mess around and listen to every bit of music and sound that I possibly could, get involved with it, play it for people that I love, all of it. And so that's the question I would pose to anyone who's in that deliberation, that existential crisis, because it really is something that I think a lot of people deal with on a very deep level. People even who seem successful with their careers and are seemingly thriving, on some level the question still is this actually the thing that I am meant to do? Is this really fulfilling my destiny? Do I have a destiny? And these are all the most important questions I think we need to ask ourselves. So I think it comes down to, hey, what lights me up? Because the soul is always tuned to that frequency, right? Like that's why there's like a full body yes for certain things, right? Like you get the goosebumps for certain things. And then some things are like more of a, I think it sounds good, yeah, that looks good on paper, right? Like we want to be really mindful of that difference. And so if you get a full body hell yes about something, don't second guess that. There's probably so much wisdom and intelligence at play in that moment to have you light up like that, that for us to like look at the spreadsheet of our mind to try to figure out whether that's actually the thing might actually have you doubt that that's the thing. So sometimes I think it's about us getting out of the way and simplifying the process and just really coming down to, okay, what lights me up? Really, really.
Yeah, and I have found in my career too that exactly what you're saying is so true. Like even with the chronic illness work that I've dedicated my life to over the last, handful of years, I had somebody tell me a really well-known like author in the wellness industry actually said, "Why don't you work with people with chronic illness?" Like maybe 7 years before I actually started Chronicon, and I remember being like, "How? Like what? Like I can't do that." I totally felt like I guess maybe not ready for it, and maybe that's part
Mm,
of it too, right? We're just not meant to do it until we are. But
mhm,
I think that's so beautiful, and I think that it's such a gift that you have been able to create Sound Sanctuary,
mm,
and you're now doing it in Amsterdam, which is just
yeah,
so wild. I mean, the last time I saw you here in New York, it was a big deal that you were sort of bi-coastal because you were also in LA, and
yeah,
now you're in Amsterdam, and it's
yeah, yeah,
so beautiful to see that. And
yeah.
Q, I know we're getting to the end of our time together, but one of the things that I also wanted to ask you about, because I did hear this in your TED talk, and it's something that really resonated with me, which is about the circle of influence and
Mm.
how that has really shaped so many moments in your life. And so I wanted to understand just a little bit about how the circle of influence maybe helps you get to Sound Sanctuary and how people can access, that as a tool for themselves too.
Yeah, totally. Well, I must say there are certain friends that did make a point of being a mirror for me as I was in this inquiry. Maybe even not even explicitly saying to people that I actually really wanted their feedback on what path I was on, but certain friends just intuitively felt like they needed to share things like, man, when I think about you, I think about music, I think about soul, I think about, so there were those moments where my circle of influence were people who influenced me to better understand how I occurred for them, like where the marketplace has me. And so on that level, that was helpful. Um, One particular person I must say was profoundly helpful was a friend of mine named Nick, who actually said something that I think is an even deeper cut on this idea of what lights us up being where our deepest dharma lies. I would say that the being lit up requires a level of meaning underneath it, I think, to get to that deep level of lit up, right? There's like happy and then there's joy, right? I think about that distinction and how joy, I think, is directly related to the level of potential. And this is not an absolute statement, but I will say it's checked out for all the hundreds of people I've worked with, is that the pain that we've experienced in life, our ability to transmute that pain and make it a purpose like you have with Chronicon, for example, or sound, how sound pulled me out of the most messed up state I've ever been in, the darkest night of the soul I've ever had. Sound was the thing that reminded me through the frequency and vibration that I felt of who I am in the matter. And it got me waking up to doing something different. And so the fact that my friend made a point of pointing to the pain as the way out, the way to my dharma and my purpose and all the light was the equation I needed to actually connect the dots on. And then, oh, wow, of course, this thing that had me feel this way as a teenager that helped me feel a sense of belonging and now is helping me heal from this divorce and to move on and to feel light again. Like these are all parts of a circle that I've been able to be a part of. So then when then I turn around and have something to offer to the same circle that is consistent with what they want from me, well, then it's a perfect match, right? And so this is a case of where people were so thrilled that I was doubling down on the thing they really got to know me through in the first place
Mm.
and finding something that was even more meaningful because of the way it helped heal me. And of course, sound is something that's been around for thousands of years. And people, when you talk about sound, people get it on such a profoundly ancient, divine, transcendent way. So, the circle of influence I've been able to turn around and offer this to has been incredible for this on ramp into what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm deeply grateful. And also, it has definitely calibrated, just to bring it full circle, calibrated my relationship with social media entirely. Because for me, when I look at who's engaging with my content, all I think about now is, are they going to come to the next ceremony? That really is the only thing that matters. Or are they orbiting this conversation in a way? Am I facilitating this conversation in a way that would compel them to come to ceremony? Because that truly is the thing that I want to offer people, and that everyone deserves to experience before they pass on to the next incarnation. So that truly is the way that I've looked at my circle of influence now, is simply wanting to influence them towards the thing that has been most meaningful and helpful for me.
That's so beautifully said. And I really appreciate how you shared that the pain you've experienced through divorce, heartbreak, I know like health stuff, so many different things, that really was the portal. And I think that has been such a um, huge case in my life. And I know for so many people that are listening, that is the case for them as well, where you sort of have this moment of, okay, the pain happened. I'm in
Mhm.
it, and I can either be completely consumed and swallowed up by it, which happens to some people. And it's honestly, I think, a valid choice. Some people, that is the best they can do in that moment with what they have.
Yeah.
And then there's this other choice, right? Which is God, which is spirit, which is divine truth. And oh my gosh, I'm getting like emotional thinking about you as my dear friend, my brother,
Mm.
family, and feeling just so honored and so proud and so in awe of what you've been able to do with all of the things that you have been through in the last
Mm.
several years. So
Thank you.
thank
I'm
you
getting
for.
emotional over here. Oh my goodness, I'm welling up over here. Yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a journey, but it's such a beautiful one. I don't wish anything would have been different, because it has brought me here. I would not have the devotion to this practice that I have if it didn't pull me out of that darkness. I needed to be on my knees so that I could experience desiring this experience, this transcendent, transformational thing for everyone else, to the point where I have devoted every waking moment of my life since picking up these instruments to other people getting this, right? Like that, it does not happen otherwise. Because if it just was a cool experience on a sunny Saturday afternoon that didn't necessarily pull me out of that, I would not be here talking about sound. I would not have the honor of facilitating this experience for people?
Oh, yes, I do know. And I love that you keep saying the word devotion, because I do think that that is it. That is everything and it all at once. So, one of the things I always ask people as we round up our conversation or wrap up our conversation is, what does thriving mean to you when we're looking at all of these different aspects of your life and you're, doing these beautiful sound journeys and facilitating sound for people and everything you've been through, and you've been online and you've been on TV and all this stuff. What now that Quddus sitting in front of me at the moment? What does thriving look like for you today?
Wow, very different. 23 years ago when I was starting out at MTV, I would say now thriving means truly having a tribe that I feel so in love with, and that I'm so excited to connect with and support and be supported by. That tribe, that belonging. I don't really care about the millions of viewers like I care back in the day about now. For me, it's my friend Mark, who just came by. He's working on a keynote that he's giving, and being able to be of support to him and feeling that brotherhood that we have. It's my beloved, who is in Bali right now, and getting on a FaceTime with her and having this kind of connection that feels like it doesn't matter where we are in the world. Like that to me is the depth that feels like thriving. Now, it used to be that it would be the breadth, I want to call it, the how many people are watching the show I'm hosting, right? But like that was a very vapid feeling compared to the depth of the relationships I have in my life, including you. You know, when we sit down, it's like, wow, it's like being at a fire with s'mores, even though the s'mores ain't there. You know what I mean? It's just like we're sitting at a fire with s'mores every time we talk. It is like soul conversation. It ain't no transient, casual small talk, and so just that level of family, of choice is really what thriving is for me.
I love that so much, and I love you so much,
Mm,
and I'm so honored that we finally got to do this together. You all the way over in Amsterdam, me in Brooklyn, and we still made it happen.
yep.
And I cannot wait to go to one of your Sound Sanctuary events and
Mm,
be a part of what you're doing. I just think it's so special. I love music. I've loved music my whole life. And so to see it be practiced and to see you embody it in this way is really such a joy. Thanks so
mm.
much for being here with us, Q.
Thank you. It's so great to connect like this, and yeah, I'm really happy that you're doing this podcast and having these conversations. You're such a gift, such a beautiful conversationalist. So it's great that everybody else gets to experience it.
Thanks, love.